Okay, so good afternoon everyone. Good day. Good morning. So this time I shall be discussing on taking the floor or turn taking. Anyway, we only have few lessons for finals. And I think they are very subjective in nature. I mean, they are very opinionated. So, at the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the ways of taking the floor, right phrases that are appropriate to turn taking practices, and of course enumerate some situations where turn taking should be practiced. Turn taking is practiced in our everyday encounter with friends, acquaintances, and colleagues in the workplace. So because if there is no turn taking, hindi mo alam kung kailan ka magsasalita, hindi mo alam kung kailan ikaw kikilos, of course, there would be chaos or may kaguluhan. That's why it should be practiced every day. So there is an exchange of ideas, opinions, sentiments, and thoughts wherein everyone is given the chance to take the floor. Kasi if there is no turn taking na sinasabi natin, one person would be talking within 3 hours while ikaw you have not yet expressed your opinion. So there is an imbalance. Kaya meron tayong tinatawag na taking the floor or turn taking. So if you're given the chance to take the floor, make sure na enough or sufficient yung oras na ititira mo for other people who would be taking the floor. So there are considerations that you need to know in taking the floor because this will create a wholesome communication environment. Kasi if there is no turn taking and if you do not consider these factors, then there would be misunderstanding. Hindi na kayo magkakaintindihan, wala nang pagkakaunawaan, or mamimiss natin yung tinatawag natin na wholesome communication. So what is taking the floor or turn taking? So this is actually a communication strategy which primary idea is to give each participant the chance to speak. This is under communication. Turn taking or taking the floor in communication is just a strategy. When we say it's strategy, it's a method that we try to implement or to apply. What strategy is this all about? As in, this is to give each participant or each member of the people talking together the chance to speak. Okay, take note of the word chance. Pagkakataon or opportunity to take the floor. It's the process by which speakers do speak one at a time. So you are given a chance to speak, and there is this what we call one at a time, because if there are two people talking at the same time together, of course there would be misunderstanding. There are some situations where turn taking is of great use, like in organizational meetings and panel discussions, because when you try to imagine magkakaroon ng meeting and then sabay-sabay yung mga audience na nagsasalita at the same time the host is speaking, then magiging nonsense or waste of time yung meeting being conducted. So there are 4 ways of taking the floor. So turn taking requires correct timing. So dapat you know when we are talking of correct timing, you're actually answering the question, when is the appropriate time or when is the right time to talk or to share ideas and opinions. And cooperation to avoid conflicts among speakers during meetings, conferences, and conversation. So this cooperation actually mean that whatever you will speak about should be related to what they are talking about or what is the issue at hand. It should be relevant. So this correct timing and cooperation should work together when you are taking the floor. Or say for example, you are a participant in a panel discussion or in a meeting. Now, how do we take turns? Paano natin malalaman? First one, of course, is recognize when to take turn. How do we recognize? You consider the ending signals of speakers. So, just like kapag nagpe-pray, usually the prayer ends in Amen. So, you can already talk. Or, Say for example, the speaker already said the words thank you or that would be all. So, pwede ka nang magsalita after those words or phrases because those are considered ending signals. Mag-e-end na yung magsasalita. And then, speak when you are called to. Of course, kung tinatawag ka na, of course, that's your time already. That's your opportunity already to share your ideas. Next, number 2 is signaling when you want to speak and interrupt. You can actually raise your hand to be recognized. Say, for example, you are going to suggest something, to add an idea, or to deduct an information. So, you can just raise your hand to be recognized. But do not talk when you will not or when you're not being recognized. When you raise your hand and nobody saw you, just continue raising your hand and do not talk just because you raise your hand already and you talk immediately. That's not the correct procedure. Next is ask the one speaking to give you the floor to avoid overlapping. So you ask the speaker, the current speaker, Mr. Speaker, can I speak first before you continue? So you ask permission. And then next, interrupt politely. So just like what I have said, you can ask permission or you could actually raise your hand. Next, number 3, holding the floor during your turn. So what do we do here? You speak sincerely with the message you want to point out. So do not forget the character being sincere. Give yourself the chance to express your opinions. Do not just agree and agree or disagree and disagree without actually expressing your opinion. So what's the reason behind that agreement? What's the reason behind that disagreement? Bakit hindi ka nagdi-disagree? Bakit ka nag-a-agree? Next, show how strong you are, not with your opinions. So your conviction. Support your arguments with enough details. So do not argue, do not speak without sufficient details. When you say sufficient, enough. It covers the ending, the body, and the opening. Next is express disagreement in a polite manner. So if you do not like the opinion of the others, if you do not like the information being shared, you express that you do not like it in a polite and courteous manner. You respect the one who holds the idea. And avoid generalizing just because in the past it's like this and then you try to generalize that ngayon ay ganoon din. Say for example, the Marcos administration. So before, if you have read historical books na they are thieves, they are magnanakaw, and then you generalize that until now they are still magnanakaw, so that's wrong. Or you have seen a teacher who is very strict, a professor who is very terror, and then you share on the you share during the opportunity na magsasalita ka na all teachers are like this, are terror and like that. So do not generalize. And then number 4, recognizing when others want to speak. So, just because you are given the time to talk, you do not like to stop naman na talking. So, you have to stop and end the interruption politely and end your turn with transition markers. So, what are these transition markers? Yung consequently, otherwise, and then, next, finally, first, last. So, you use those words so your audience or your hearers or listeners will be enlightened as to malapit ka na bang mag-end, nag-i-start ka pa lang, or nasa conclusion ka pa lamang. Next is principles of turn-taking. Interruptions in conversations or meetings are violations of the rules of turn-taking. So, do not interrupt when somebody is talking about a very significant idea, a very important information. There is interruption when a new speaker interrupts and takes the floor until finishes what to say. To interrupt kasi is to disturb or halt an ongoing process or action by a sudden interference. Overlapping happens when two speakers are speaking at the same time. So, interruption, this is a term na tinatawag natin when you try to stop someone who is currently speaking. And overlapping naman when you try to talk while somebody is talking. So, in short, you are talking at the same time. And this is also discouraged in conversation. Next is another interruption is butting in, where a new speaker tries to gain the floor but does not succeed. Participants should take in mind that each speaker takes turn in speaking, which provides a manner of orderly conversation. So in conversation, overlap happens which means there is simultaneous talk between two or more speakers because of the desire to start a turn before another in order not to miss the opportunity and to extend over and partly cover something. So, this overlapping is when you try to take turns while it's not yet your time. Hindi pa yun yung time mo. You are not yet recognized to talk and then you are already talking while somebody is still speaking. That is overlapping. So, there are two types of overlapping. We have the competitive overlap and cooperative overlap. When we say competitive, this kind of overlap explains how one speaker dominates a conversation or how a listener might take some power back with different interrupting ways. So, one speaker is already overlapping the other speaker or dominating. When we say dominating, mas malakas na yung kanyang pagsasalita, mas nagigain niya na yung attention ng audience. The speaker has this intention to steal the floor and to attract the attention away from the ongoing speech. Pointing out a negative situation, requesting a new information, explaining a failure, and elaborating a process are examples of this. So, when we say competitive overlap, somebody is already speaking and then when someone tries to speak in a louder voice, in a more elaborative way, in such a way na mas nakakatch niya na yung attention ng audience, that is competitive overlap. Pero kung meron din naman tayong tinatawag na cooperative overlap or ito yung positive na pag-overlap. This kind of overlap entails a description on how a listener might ask for a clarification on a point or add to the conversation with further examples that support the speaker's point. So it's positive in such a way that the person who overlaps would try to ask further examples, something like that. So example of this is two persons of equal rank like two friends. So there is no competition. The other person is not trying to steal the floor. So there are points to consider when it is your turn to speak. Number 1 here is keep your words relevant and reasonably short. In other terms, it should be brief and concise. So discuss only the important points, the relevant points. Be time conscious. So look at your watch. Make sure that you are not very time consuming. Remember that you are not the only speaker. So marami pang pwedeng sumunod sa'yo na magsalita. Be polite even if you're trying to take the floor from another speaker. So say for example, you like to disagree, you still consider to be polite. Speak with kind words. You choose the words that you utter. Choose words that does not insult others and maintain a positive tone. Hindi naman yung parang makikipag-away ka na or makikipagsigawan ka na, something like that. Be professional when taking the floor. Next, do not talk incessantly without letting other parties air their own ideas. So, saying just enough is better than speaking too much. So, wag namang masyadong to the sky's the limit naman na yung pagsasalita mo. And then, maaring mali pa rin sinasabi mo. And then, give others the chance to speak. To acknowledge others, you may employ visual signals. So, you can smile to them, you can bow, you can nod, or step back just to signal na, ikaw ning magsasalita, kapatid. Ikaw na yung next. So, parang ganon. So, that is all about turn-taking or taking the floor. That is very important kahit sa loob ng klase. What if nagpapagraded recitation si teacher during the face-to-face implementation of classes? So, parang pagsabay-sabay na si row 1, si row 2, row 3, and all the students na magre-recite, of course, the teacher will never recognize who is telling the correct answer, or others may just be tawag dito, murmuring, or inopen lang nila yung bunganga nila para masabi mo na nagsasalita. So, there is a misunderstanding. That's why turn taking or taking the floor is very important. Next, we have here asking clarification. So, at the end of this topic naman, you should be able to identify the ways in asking clarification, formulate clarificatory or follow-up questions, and perform communicative tasks involving clarification. So, in the different communication settings, clarification involves offering back to the speaker the vital meanings as understood by the listener of what they have just said. Because kung ano man yung itratry na i-convey ng speaker na meaning may not be the same with the meaning that is understood or that is accepted by the listener. Maaring iba yung pagtanggap nung nakikinig doon sa gustong ipabatid noong nagsasalita. So, clarification is imperative in many situations, especially when what is being communicated is challenging in some way. Say, for example, something na very hazardous, something na very ritualistic, or critical yung topic. Of course, clarification is very important. Communication can be difficult for many reasons. Perhaps sensitive emotions are being discussed, or you are listening to some multifarious information or following instructions. Say, for example, nagdi-discuss yung isang doctor on how to give a dosage ng isang gamot doon sa bata. Of course, you need to ask for clarification if something is not clear to you. So, what are the concepts about clarification? Clarification is a form of reflection that seeks to eliminate ambiguity. So, when we say ambiguity, it's not, it's a state of not having not clear ideas or confusion or misunderstanding. Ambiguity is when you try to understand a certain idea in a literal and a figurative meaning. So, pwede kasing yung isang words magkaroon siya ng multiple meaning. That is what we call ambiguity. You are not clear about the meaning that is being conveyed. So, next, clarifying questions are tools used by active listeners to ensure understanding and obtain essential information. These types of questions are simple inquiries of fact. Say, for example, yung clarification questions, am I correct if I understood that I use the medicine, I take the medicine twice a day? So, that is a clarification question. The purpose of clarification is to, first of course, ensure that the listener's understanding of what the speaker has said is correct, reducing misunderstanding. So, of course, ang number one talaga na goal ng clarification na sinasabi natin is to check whether nagmamatch ba yung ikino-convey na information ng speaker to the information na na-receive or na-understand nung listener. That is, of course, to reduce misunderstanding. Next is reassure the speaker that the listener is genuinely interested in them and is attempting to understand what they are saying. So, it's also another way of assuring, or it's also an assurance as to whether your listener is interested or not. Kasi kung magka-clarify yung audience mo sa sinasabi mo, that means they are trying to reflect, they are trying to listen, and they are trying to understand. Next, number 3, as an extension of reflecting, clarifying reassures the speaker that the listener is attempting to understand the messages they are expressing. Clarifying questions are simple questions of fact. They clarify the dilemma and provide the nuts and bolts so that the participants in communication can ask good probing questions and provide useful feedback. So, examples of clarifying question. Is this what you said? Is this right? Tama ba yung narinig ko na ganito? Ganito ba yung, tama ba yung pagkakasabi ko? Something like that. So, some examples of non-directive clarification. So, when we say non-directive, hindi mo diretso na sinasabi, hindi ko naintindihan tong parte na to. So, they are clarification-seeking questions, such as, could you repeat? So, pag pinapaulit, ibig sabihin, it's not clear. It's not totally understood. When you said blank, what do you mean? I don't feel clear about the main issue here. I am not quite sure I understand what you are saying. So, they are non-directive clarification-seeking question. Hindi nila sinasabing hindi nila naintindihan. They are just trying to give a hint na, itong part na to, it's actually not clear sa akin. Something like that. Now, there are tips in clarifying questions. When you are the listener in sensitive environment, the right sort of non-directive questioning can enable the speaker to describe their viewpoint more fully. So, kapag sensitive yung pinag-uusapan, you use non-directive clarification seeking. Huwag mo sabihin, hindi ko ito naintindihan. So, do not directly say that. Pwede mong sabihin, could you repeat something like this? Parang ganun. Next is asking the right question at the right time can be crucial and comes with practice because there are right questions for clarifying. The best questions are open-ended as they give the speaker choice in how to respond, whereas closed question allow only very limited responses. So, kailangan open-ended. When you say open-ended, yung speaker ay free siya na mamili ng kanyang isasagot. Next, if your role is to assist a speaker to talk about an issue, often the most effective questioning starts with when, where, how, and why. For example, when did you first start feeling like this? Why do you feel this way? So, parang ganun. Next, closed questions usually elicit a yes or no. So, as I have said, closed questions kasi they are accepting limited answers. Say, for example, did you always feel like this? So, you can only answer this with whether yes or a no. Then, were you aware of feeling this way? So, you could also answer this by yes or no only. Next, clarifying involves non-judgmental questioning or summarizing and seeking feedback as to its accuracy, whether correct or wrong yung narinig mo. There is no judgment at all. Guidelines for clarifying. Clarification is the skill. So, take note that clarification is a skill. Bakit? You do not clarify when you don't try to understand or to reflect sa mga bagay na naririnig mo. You clarify only the moment you are interested to listen. So, it's a skill we use to ensure that we have understood the message of the speaker in an interpersonal exchange. So, you try to follow these guidelines. Number 1, admit if you are unsure about what the speaker means. Because you clarify only the moment you are not sure of what meaning they are trying to convey. You ask for repetition. You state what the speaker has said as you understand it and check whether this is what they really said. Ask for specific examples. Use open, non-directive questions if appropriate. Ask if you have got it right and be prepared to be corrected. You are clarifying and expect that the speaker may either accept or will not accept your idea because you are trying to make sure naman, ito ba yung narinig ko? So, pwedeng sasabihin ng speaker, that's not correct. This is what I have said. This is what I'm trying to point out. So, you have to prepare yourself na pwedeng ma-reject or pwedeng ma-accept yung inyong clarification. purpose of summarizing clarification is a further extension to clarification. A summary involves reviewing what has taken place during the whole conversation. It's important to keep only to the essential. When we say essential, yung mga importanteng components of the conversation lamang. And it must be given from the speaker's frame of reference, not an interpretation from the listener's viewpoint. Because if you refer it to the listener's viewpoint, kung maraming listeners, magkakaiba na yan. So, kailangan you base on the frame of reference, speaker's frame of reference. So, objectives of summary and clarification, we have review of understanding and not to give explanation anymore. Because when you summarize, you are not actually explaining. The explanation is during the talk and the summary is just a review of understanding. Next, summarizing should be done at the end of the conversation. So, bakit ka naman magsasummarize kasi sa simula? So, sample of clarifying phrases. Any questions before I go on? Or did you say? I haven't explained that very well. So, or pwede rin I missed the bit where you explained. So, these are the sample of clarifying phrases. So, sample situation where clarification is necessary. Classroom communication, speaking exams. Tama po ba yung pagkakaintindi ko ng instruction? Telephoning and teleconferencing, giving and receiving instruction, especially if these are instruction for sensitive situations or critical situations. Clearing up the inevitable misunderstandings of second language communication. Next, asking for clarification of particular point. What does that mean? Checking your understanding. If I understand you correctly, please tell me. Parang ganon. So, just showing lack of understanding, pardon, please repeat the idea. Or asking for changes in the delivery, can you explain that again? But starting at the end and working your way back, so parang ganon. And next, responding to language, body language, facial expressions that show that clarification is needed. So, I can see from your face that parang nakikita mo naman yung audience mo kung parang nakakunot noon na sila. Ibig sabihin, they are confused. Giving more explanation. So, those are the strategies. Next, common student problems with checking and clarifying language. Using I beg your pardon. Using what? Similar things with sounds like Other directions, translations from first language like one more time. Activities to teach checking and clarifying. So even more than other kinds of functional language, the best way of presenting and checking and clarifying phrases and tactics is to first put students into situation where they need the language in order to see what they can already do and then help them expand on it. First, we have checking and clarifying gestures. So you can elicit or practice phrases for showing general lack of understanding, asking for repetition, showing you can't hear, asking the speaker to slow down, with gestures such as cupping an ear and shrugging shoulders. So you can actually ask for clarification by using gestures. Then next, check your understanding or their understanding card game. So are you following me? So parang ganun. Is that clear? Checking and clarifying tips and useful phrases. So as there are many cultural differences and general communication tactics related to this point, it is worth tying together tips and language. So you say, try to be specific, or I beg your pardon, or say what. Checking and clarifying politeness competition. So do not obviously say rude phrases like what? Something like that. Checking and clarifying longer phrases games. So, pwede kang gumamit ng games. Next, checking and clarifying with pieces of paper. Checking and clarifying the first lesson. Dictation for checking and clarifying. Pair work dictation for checking and clarifying, and of course you can also use and explain activities. And then, second to the last, checking and clarifying the role plays. And then the last one is checking and clarifying classroom questions. So those are the strategies or activities in order for you to teach checking and clarifying. So you could by gestures, by card games, phrases, competition, games, papers, something like that, lessons. So those are the two important lessons. We have the turn taking and then asking clarification. So the photos I have used in this presentation or in this discussion are taken from the English Language Proficiency book produced by the Cagayan State University select faculties. Now, dear students, if you have questions, please drop them in our group chat and we will try to answer them one by one. We will try to clarify them. So, of course, as our practice, you have to wait for activities to be uploaded via Lens and then send the summary of this topic in our group chat for your attendance. Do not forget to indicate your name on the upper right corner of your notebooks or papers when you send your summaries. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have suggestions, feedback, feel free to air them in our group chat. Thank you and happy learning, everyone.